Today we learned and sang a new song together, We Are Weaving Our Lives, by Alexa Sunshine Rose. I like that name. I think I'm going to add like sunshine to my name. I've so appreciated her music that I have added her to my playlist, and I've also been inspired by her. She describes herself as a singer, a songwriter, a mother, an artist, a mystic. And as I learned more about her, I realized that she has indeed woven her life, all the various dimensions of her life, as she offers who she is to the world and to other artists. But I was most intrigued when I read that she also describes herself, get this, as an album doula. Let me explain. She offers to use her experience, and I'm quoting, in the creation of musical albums to guide to other artists as they make their way through the steps of visioning and making preparations and recording tracks and producing songs and printing CDs or distributing music. That's a lot of labor that she's given. But of course, we all know what the traditional idea of a doula is, right? It's someone who provides physical and emotional and informational support to someone giving birth. But maybe you've even heard of this emerging field of a death doula. A good friend of mine, a colleague, recently went through some training to be a death doula, someone who provides some logistical planning and time before, during, or after death, conducts rituals and comforting practices. My imagination, however, was really expanded beyond this birth and death doula when I read how she describes herself. Alexa Rose, has allowed me to see that we can do all kinds of doula-ing. If that's a word. It is now. Let's say it, doula-ing. Keep spreading the word. It's a new word. I just love this broadening idea of being a doula. If she can be an album doula, well, how about each of us? As I look across this room, I'm starting to wonder how each of us could be and already may be a doula to something. Each of us could or maybe already are bringing forth something in our own lives, in the lives of another, or in this congregation or in this broader world. Watch out now. The dimensions of my perception of each of you has now expanded quantitatively and qualitatively. From this moment on, I will look at you and wonder, what kind of doula are you? Or I might ask, how is your doula-ing going? Now, I will want to take a deep look within myself and look to each of you to also take a hard look at yourself and ask out loud or just quietly, what are you bringing forth into your own life? What are you bringing forth into the life of someone else right now? What are you bringing forth in this congregation? And what are you bringing forth into this world? The bar has raised from this moment on. Even before you or I could have anticipated it. I can no longer imagine you simply as occupying a seat in this splendid sanctuary on a delightful, kind of rainy Sunday morning. I can no longer imagine you as sitting before a screen. on this particular day, maybe we can all ease into this revelation of our new vocation as doulas. Let it sink in. Absorb it slowly. Recognize it's always been there, wanting to happen. Asking ourselves, what am I meant to bring forth in my life right now? Ask ourselves, what have I meant to bring forth in another person right now? What am I meant to bring forth in this congregation right now? What am I meant to bring forth in this hurting, suffering, aspiring, promising world right now? I have to admit it's a little scary to move into this role and to acknowledge the doula potential that's in each of us. Are you scared a little? Are you ready? Are you ready for this? Are you ready to step up into this? Maybe, not sure. Let me see the small print, says Rebecca. I know that there's a part of me, and maybe there's a part of you that would rather not, that I had not mentioned it. But from this moment on, I'm looking at each of you and myself as a doula, as someone who is meant to bring forth something in your life, in this world, in the life of another. There's no going back, sorry. There should have been a caution sign at the door. But here we are in the presence of a convention of doulas. Alexa Rose's lyrics in the song include these words you might remember. We are weaving our lives. We are weaving our hearts and our minds. We are weaving the bright and dark threads of our journeys through. For me, these words, weaving our lives, capture for me my hope and my declaration for each of us and for our congregation in this new year. Indeed, may each of us find ways to weave our hearts and our minds as we come forth into this season of our lives. Now that we have been commissioned as doulas, we must invite ourselves or others into a creative territory that resides within us and among us as human beings. It's that creative territory that I want to invite us into as we approach this new church year. Sure, we could live a life in such a way where we add a little water and stir. We could live as a congregation in such a way where we just kind of add a little water and stir. But I think something else is being meant for us in this moment. Perhaps you've already recognized that we've started off this church year in some distinctively different ways, on purpose. Our reemergence camp a few weeks ago, our Ingathering weekend yesterday and today, we're signaling to each other that how we engage in the beginning with one another is important and significant. To live up to our potential as doulas, from my perspective, means that we have to risk creating, tapping into the impetus from the creative spirit within and among us, take risks and experiment for the sake of what is wanting to emerge in our life, no matter how old or how young we may be. It was the Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams who urged us beyond the just add water and stir kind of life. and to a just kind of add water and stir kind of faith. Adams declared, an unexamined faith is not worth having, for it can be true only by accident. Think about that for a moment. Should I read it again? This will be on the exam. An unexamined faith is not worth having, for it can be true only by accident. In other words, examination and re-examination of who we are is part of the ongoing creative religious response that we commit ourselves to as we tend what it means for us to be Unitarian Universalists in this moment of history. Our response cannot be set forever 4 decades ago, even a decade ago, even 3 years ago. No, our response needs an Adam's admonition, constant examining and tending. A contemporary interpreter of James Luther Adams, Reverend Kim Beach, adds this: Adams holds that liberalism must no longer be confused with lax, uncritical, or mere broad-minded attitudes, least of all in an age of rising tyrannies of the right and the left. Beach writes, the aim of religious awareness, religious faith, religious community, and religious life must be radical change. He concludes, things do not simply work themselves out. Human beings must push. As doulas, you all know that, right? Let's say that word together. Push. In this creative life, this creative religion making that is the ambition that we have as Unitarian Universalists, although we can easily succumb to a lax, uncritical, and mere broad-minded attitudes, our truth, our faith, requires of us ongoing creativity, consistent reflection, and constant tending. In other words, we must be a doula, if for nothing else, for our own emerging faith. Things don't just happen. Now, one other thing about these lyrics from Alexa Sunshine Rose, we are weaving our lives. I think the whole art of weaving gives us a great metaphor for what can be about individually and in our own lives and in this congregation this coming year, particularly if we are to embody our role as a doula. Let's unpack that metaphor for just a little bit. In weaving, you have at least 2 crossing threads. I think I'll get this right. The warp and the weft. The warp are the vertical threads. The weft are the horizontal threads. Following me so far? I only learned this a couple weeks ago. When you're weaving, you need both warp and weft to be bound to the loom. Otherwise, the weaving will be fragile and fluttering. The warp threads of a weaving, like the strings of a harp, need to be evenly tensioned to the others so that it can almost sing as you run your hand across it. When we think of weaving our lives, it includes this warp and weft as well. Likewise, the warp strings of our own life, they can represent our vertical connections, what centers us between the ground and the sky of our life, between the aspiration and the reality. The warp strings, these vertical strings, can represent our inner life, our deepest intentions, our connection to spirit, to God, our connections to our deepest values, whatever it is that grounds us and centers us. Any or all of those things. And some of you know more about weaving than I do, but as I understand it, oftentimes we do not, in a finished weaving, sometimes see the warp threads, those vertical threads. These vertical strings are essential, however. They are, in a sense, the inner strength of the weaving. The weft, the horizontal threads weave in and out between the warp threads, touching each of the vertical threads as it passes by. Likewise, as we weave our lives, the horizontal threads might represent our actions in the world. In this metaphor of weaving, we can imagine that each of our daily actions then weave through our values, the warp, our connection to spirit or source, our deepest attention, touching each of those on the way. Make sense to you? One writer on weaving has said, "Because I realize that my life could end at any time, I work to stay conscious of weaving my daily actions with that which I have deemed valuable." What a journey it is, she writes, to stay awake to what is most valuable. Our lives reflect our priorities. Our actions speak louder than our words. For everything that we do is done or could be done with our priorities. By our actions, we actually determine our priorities. Without these vertical threads, without these priorities, without these stands that we want to take in the world or align ourselves to, our actions can become very random, peripatetic, I think is the word, or wandering, I should say. So as we weave our lives, we need to know, what are those commitments that we have made in which our actions need to come into constant contact with? The discipline, I believe, of the spiritual life, or to be human religiously, is to keep finding those vertical threads, those centering values, those sources of deep connection as we orient and reorient our lives and in the world. So as a congregation, we have committed ourselves to a particular set of grounding values and purposes. We stated in our mission this way, as Helen helped us this morning. First Unitarian Church of Wilmington is a beloved community that nourishes minds and spirits. That's the warp. That's one warp. That fights injustice. That transforms the world through loving action. These are our vertical threads, our grounding intentions from which we aim together and individually to weave our actions. They orient us, or could orient us and reorient us. And we aim to touch them again and again as we weave our lives. So, certainly, we can get off track. Perhaps you know that the Navajo, when they weave a rug, they deliberately weave a thread into the rug that looks like a mistake. Any of you have a thread like that in your life? From their perspective, that mistake keeps the rug from being perfect. And it serves, from their perspective, as a path for spirit to enter. So likewise, we must find ways to accept our mistakes as a path for continual creative response and action, as an opportunity for creativity or the creative spirit to enter. One weaver says about her own weaving, "As a weaver, The ideal of perfection will sabotage my choice of colors, my pattern ideas, and slow down my production if I let it. Mistakes, she claims, are an inevitable part of being an artist, a mother, a woman. How we respond to mistakes, makes the difference between an integrated or a tattered fabric. So, my fellow doulas, let's weave our lives. Let's keep weaving our lives. Let's be clear about what are those principles, those stands, those values from which we want to orient our actions again and again as we weave our lives. Let's get doula-ing together.